Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we continue to talk about the situation in Venezuela. Is this a coup d'etat? We're joined by Alfredo de Zayas in Geneva. He visited Venezuela in 2017 on behalf of the United Nations. At the time, he was the UN independent expert on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order. We still with us, Miguel Tinker Salas of Pomona College in California. Alfredo de Zayas, welcome to Democracy Now! Talk about what we are seeing right now in Venezuela. Are we seeing a coup d'etat unfolding?
First of all, Amy, I am quite honored to be in your program. I endorse every word that my knowledgeable colleague, Professor Tinker Salas, has just said. As far as coup d'etat, well, it is not a consummated coup d'etat. It is an attempted coup d'etat. Now, we all believe in democracy. Your program is called Democracy Now! Now, there's nothing more undemocratic than a coup d'etat. And also boycotting elections. As you know, there have been 26, 27 elections in Venezuela since Chavez was elected in 1998. So if you want to play the game, you have to participate in the elections. And if the opposition refused to participate in the elections, they bear responsibility for the situation that has ensued. Beyond that, I want to endorse the words of my Secretary General Guterres, who has called for dialogue. I very much supported the mediation carried out in 2016, 2018 by José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, the former Spanish Prime Minister, and that actually would have led to a sensible compromise. The text was on the table, was ready for signature. At the last moment, Julio Borges refused to sign it. Now, is it a coup d'etat? Well, this is a matter of semantics. We have here an unconstitutional situation in which the legislature is usurping competences that belong to the executive and to the judiciary. The judiciary has already declared all of these actions and declarations of the National Assembly to be unconstitutional. Now, I am not a constitutional lawyer in Venezuela, but I did have the opportunity when I was in Venezuela in November, December 2017, to speak with all stakeholders, with members of the National Assembly, of the Chamber of Commerce, of the university, students, opposition leaders, opposition NGOs, Provea, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the OAS representative there, etc., and, of course, with all the ministers. Now, the function of a rapporteur is not to go around grandstanding. The function of the rapporteur is not naming and shaming. The function of a rapporteur is to listen, and then to study all the relevant documentation and arrive at constructive proposals, which I formulated in my report, which was presented to the Human Rights Council last September 10, 2018. Now, I formulated many recommendations, and actually the government already implemented some of my recommendations even shortly after my visit, because I also gave the foreign minister of Venezuela, Mr. Arriaza, I gave him a 6-page confidential memorandum upon my departure. Some of that was reflected then in my report. But my concern, and I think it is the concern of every person who believes in democracy and in the rule of law, is to calm the waters. My concern is to avoid a civil war. One thing that I told to members of the opposition is that you simply cannot topple the government, and Maduro is not simply going to roll over. I mean, there are 7, 8, 9 million Venezuelans who are committed Chavistas, and you have to take them into account. What are you going to do with them if you topple the government through a coup d'etat? What are you going to do with these people? These people are most likely going to fight. Now, we don't want fighting. We don't want shedding of blood. Therefore, the only logical avenue now is to call for dialogue, and I hope that the Vatican and Mexico and Uruguay will lead the way.
What about the role of the media in what is happening right now in Venezuela? You would have no idea if you watch the networks in the United States. I'm not just talking about Fox. I'm talking about CNN and MSNBC. If you watch in any regular way,
no, I know
what is unfolding, the level of involvement of the United States, right through to this video that Vice President Pence posted right before Juan Guaido announced from the streets that he was the president, the head of the National Assembly, the Nancy Pelosi equivalent.
Well, the mainstream media has been complicit in this attempted coup. The mainstream media has prepared through a conundrum of fake news, an atmosphere that the public should accept this regime change imposed by the United States on the people of Venezuela, because ultimately it's supposed to be for the good of the Venezuelans. Now, this reminds us of the run-up to the Iraq invasion of 2003. Now, the mainstream media supported all the lies, all the manipulations of George W. Bush and of Tony Blair to convince the world that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And on this excuse, it was made somewhat palatable to world public opinion that you would enter Iraq and change the government by force. Now, the fact is that here you had not only a crime of aggression, not only an illegal war, as the late Secretary General Kofi Annan in more than one occasion stated. Here you have actually a revolt of 43 states, the coalition of the willing, against international law. If there is one tenet of the UN Charter that is jus cogens, that is peremptory international law, is the prohibition of the use of force. And this attack on Iraq was conducted by 43 states in collusion, breaking all the rules of international law. Now, that was preceded by this media campaign. Now, we have had, for the last years, actually, a media campaign against Venezuela. And I'm particularly familiar with it because before I went to Venezuela, I had to read everything and all the reports, not only of the Washington Post and of the New York Times, but also the reports of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, the reports of Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, etc., proposing that there was a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. Now, when I went to Venezuela, I again took the opportunity to interview representatives of Amnesty International and Provea and the other opposition NGOs, but I also had the opportunity to study the documents, to compare, to see the statistics, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, there was no humanitarian crisis. There was hunger. There was what we say in Spanish, zozobra. There was suffering. There was malnutrition, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not just stating that there is an economic crisis. That's not the crucial point. The crucial point is which are the causes of that so-called humanitarian crisis. And certainly those who are crying humanitarian crisis should be the least to say that they should now solve the problem. There's a principle of international law called ex injuria non oritur jus, which is the principle of estoppel. So they should be stopped from demanding regime change when they themselves are the ones who are aggravating a situation caused initially by the dramatic fall of the oil prices. I wanted to make a reference to Professor Pascualina Curcio of the University of Caracas. I had the opportunity of seeing her for a couple of hours when I was there, and she published a book called The Visible Hand of the Market. This is a book that documents the financial blockade, documents the whole complex economic war being waged against Venezuela, which reminds you of the economic war that was waged against Salvador Allende. And what's interesting is after 3 years of economic war against Allende, not succeeding in toppling Salvador Allende, it took a coup d'etat by General Augusto Pinochet, which brought the Chilean people 17 years of dictatorship. We should be asking ourselves, do we want a coup d'etat in Venezuela? And what legitimacy would the government of Guaido have? And what kind of elections would be held? Now, there have been, as I said, 26 or 27 elections in Venezuela since 1998. And President Jimmy Carter and the Carter Center went repeatedly to Venezuela to monitor those elections. And Carter had a very good opinion of the system and of the safeguards of elections in Venezuela.
Qué triste se oye la lluvia en los techos de cartón. Qué triste vive mi gente en las casas de cartón.